per class today than I expected because there was an issue this weekend with, guess what? AP Classroom decided to have an outage this weekend, so I extended the quiz. I think there are 4 people who still haven't had a chance to do it, so I extended it through tomorrow. If you want, we can meet up on Wednesday. One of the things I wanted to talk about today was that Sonic quiz. I was looking at the results so far, and they were quite impressive. There were 17 questions. I made it 30 minutes because we have to start working on timeframes for the AP exam. And most people were at 70% or better, which is good. 60% is actually good on the multiple choice on the AP exam. It's not on the same scale that we have for our grades. So it's not like if you aren't making a 90% on the multiple choice, you're not doing well. We're looking for about a 60% on the multiple choice and about 4s or so on the essays out of 6. Or like a 3, a 4, and a 5, or some kind of range like that. So if when you're doing your practices, you can target at least 60% on the multiple choice and at least a 4 on the essay, and consistently through the semester be working for that range or better, then you can feel pretty confident that you'll pass the exam with a 3. So that's just kind of like a little thumbnail guide. Now that's if they keep the test the same. They're saying still that they're going to have a full AP exam, unlike last year where they just had 1 essay question. So as long as that's still true, then that's the rule of thumb, is like a 60%. So as soon as it closes tomorrow, I will go ahead and make that available to you so that you can go and see your score. And then next week, we'll go over the answers and talk a little bit about some of the ones. One of the good things about AP Classroom is that I can look and see like what percentage of the people got this one right, what percentage of the students got this one wrong. So I like to sort of target in on the ones that multiple people had trouble with and go in and talk about those. I was going to do that today, but like I said, I had to extend the quiz. So we will put that on the agenda for next week. But after it closes tomorrow, you can go in and you should be able to view your results. If you can't, let me know, send me an email or something, and it's probably just a setting thing that I have to figure out. So I had wanted to talk about that today, but I'm going to hold off. I skipped the updates. Progress reports upload this Friday, which is funny to me because the third 6 weeks grades were just due today because of the breach. That's what they're calling it, the breach. But yeah, I'm a little bit behind in my grading. I got thrown a few curveballs. I also teach the dual enrollment English 4. I don't know if you know, for STC, and they're behind by 2 weeks. So we had our faculty meeting and there's some stuff I have to take care of, and I had to put a little bit of grading on hold. So I think I graded your notes. I have 1 or 2 more things to look at before the progress reports go in, but those are due on Friday. You should be able to look at your portal already. You should be able to see your grades for your various classes and even 4th 6 weeks. When I went back into it, it was completely back to normal. So I don't know how that is in your other classes, but you should be able to access the portal at this point in time. Any questions about that? You can put them in the chat or you can unmute. If you have any questions, I'm going to put the chat over there because I live in hope. All right, I already talked about discussion of AP Classroom sonnets. Okay, I want to do some notes. Last week, I asked you for your 2 formative questions to talk about the point that is being made in 2 of the poems from the previous week. So if you're taking notes in a notebook or something like that or online, why don't you open that and jot a few things down, because I was noticing some things on those questions. And I also want to open up those poems, they were on a Jamboard, right? This one. So I had asked you about the main points in two of the poems that we hadn't talked about in class, right? I went through and talked about this one and that one, but last week in your formatives, I asked you a little bit about this poem, which is a Petrarchan or Italian sonnet, and also this one, which is also a Petrarchan sonnet. And I asked in both days, I asked, what's the main point? And so today, what I want to talk about, you can name your notes this right here. The difference between summary and analysis. So when we're talking about looking at poetry, there's a difference between saying, this is what the poem says, and saying, this is what the poem means. So when we say, this is what the poem says, that's like a paraphrase, it's a retelling, it's a summary of what's written. So for example, let me use the Barless poem. This is a sonnet about two bubbles, but it's not really about two bubbles, right? So this whole poem is actually a conceit because it is an extended metaphor. The word that we use to describe an extended metaphor, you can say extended metaphor or you can say conceit. But it's about these two bubbles, like imagine a fishbowl, right? And well, you know what? I have this glass of water. Let's imagine that this is a fishbowl right here, right? Oh, that's better if it's right here, I think. And yeah. Oh, look, it goes invisible. Oh, that's some Harry Potter stuff right there. Oh, okay, I'll put it right here. So imagine that this is my fishbowl, right? And if it was filled up to the top with water, right, up to here. So this poem, to summarize it, is talking about two bubbles that appear on the surface of the water in this fishbowl, right? And the two bubbles are kind of like on opposite sides of the bowl. And those bubbles travel around the edge of the water until a goldfish comes up from underneath and breaks the surface tension of the water. And when it does that, it creates a little ripple, and the two bubbles then move from being on opposite sides to being right next to each other, and then they collide and they combine. That is what happens in the poem, right? And that by itself is not very significant. But when we take the second half of the poem, right after the octave and into the sestet, where's my little pen? I'm trying to juggle my water and my pen at the same time. So the bubbles become one, but the meaning of the poem comes in the sestet at the bottom, right? So if I was just summarizing, I would say, okay, two bubbles collided and turned into one bubble because of this fish or because of fate or whatever you want to call it. But in the second half, we find out that the bubbles represent two people, right? And then the bowl would be sort of like civilization or the world, right? And then the fish would represent, you may want to guess? What is it that makes the two bubbles come together or the two people find each other?
Is it the fish, the goldfish?
Right, the fish. And so what does the fish represent?
Oh,
Fate.
no.
Yeah, fate. Very good. So it just happens that the fish popped his little head up and it made the two bubbles go together. And so it's representing that these two people, like fate intervened and they ended up finding each other. I really love this poem because it reminds me of Mr. Ramos and I. I'm from Detroit and he's from Chicago, in case you didn't know that. And he moved here with his family when he was in high school. I moved here after college to teach. We both ended up going to school, getting our first job, and we were teaching and we were teachers together. Well, what kind of fate is that we ended up meeting each other down here when we were from two other complete places? So if I'm summarizing, I'm going to say something like, fate causes these two bubbles to come together. But if I'm talking about meaning, right, I have to generalize and say, okay, how does that apply to every person's life? Because that's why we read literature. We don't read literature to find out about bubbles. We read literature to find about our own lives and to enrich our own lives and think about deeper thoughts within our own experience. So I have to take the idea of the bubbles on, in the fishbowl, and I have to take it to a bigger idea. And fate is what's going to get me there. So with every poem that I read, I can think to myself, okay, well, what's the big topic? Is it love? Is it fate? Is it hate? Is it grudges? What is it that this poem is essentially about? And then what is the lesson that I'm being taught about that? So here, the idea is they might have perished singly, might have known life, but not love. That's how I know that the two bubbles represent people, because bubbles can't have love. I'm pretty sure they can't. So the bubbles represent people, and they might have just lived and died and popped and never have known each other, except for the intervention of that fateful fish. Whatever it was that happened that made those two come together. They might have known life, but not love, and living separate have ceased imperfect. They might have lived their whole lives never perfected by the love of the other one. Sundered mate from mate, and thou and I have walked the world alone and died so. We might have never even met each other. So now the speaker is speaking directly to their beloved, right? Just like these bubbles. We might never have ever known each other, imagine, except for fate pushing us in the direction. The strong storm of fate, right? If the strong storm had not blown that swept us hither on the tides of fate. And I love that ending because it goes back to the water, right? It goes back to the idea that the fish comes up and it brings those two bubbles together, and this is not an ocean, right? There's no storm happening here. The storm is the fish breaking the surface tension. And so fate is joined in that idea of the storm. The fate and the fishbowl are joined together. So what is the main point of this poem? It's about fate in general, not just the fate in this fishbowl, right? So you kind of have to do this job of extending your interpretation, figuring out what the poem says. Yes, we have to do that. That's steps 1 and 2 of the 1, 2, 3 analysis. We have to figure out what the poem's saying. We can't get to meaning unless we do that. But we have to go to step 3, and we have to say, okay, what is this saying about life in general, about the human condition, about all of us? What can I take away from this poem into my own life? And we do that with all of literature. So in this case, I want to formulate that about fate. I want to say, you know what? Fate is a powerful force that we should not discount in our lives. And if we look back over our lives, we can see the hand of fate in it. Who brought me to try out for that sport? What made me show up at that particular moment in church when the priest or minister was saying that very thing that I needed to hear? So these elements of fate, we cannot explain them as human beings. We do not completely understand that. Some people will call it, the intervention of God. Some people, there's different things that could be called. But that fate drives us in some ways and causes our lives to take turns. That is the message of the poem. And that's more powerful because anybody can look at that and take from it. Not everybody needs to think about bubbles on a rim. You see? So we always want to take it to that next level. We don't want to stop with just saying, oh, this is what the poet is saying. We want to say, what does the poet mean? And how can we take that meaning to ourselves? That's the biggest thing that we have to practice between now and the AP exam, because I've read thousands and thousands of essays for College Board. For the last 2 years, I've done readings and scored essays for the AP exam. And so many of them, like 80% of them, all they do is repeat what the passage says, whether it's a poem or a passage from a story or whatever. They don't ever take it to the next step and say, this is what it means. And so they never really make it out of the low-level papers. Like 80% of them are in that group. So if we can practice jumping out and into that meaning with everything that we read, then we're already going to be into the upper ranges of those essays. All right, let me talk about questions. Go ahead and post them if you have them. I like my library background. I think it looks cool. Makes me look smart. Okay, let's talk about this one. So this one is called My Cathedral. And it is about nature. Many people wrote about this. It's about nature and appreciating nature. And that is true. The poem is about that. But it leaves out an important element. And that is that all of these elements of nature, the cathedral towers, the arches, the choirs, the arabesque of vines, the sepulchre, the marble bishop, all of these things are comparing this forest scene to what?
Church.
A church, exactly, a cathedral. And that's important in his message because the message isn't just about, it's not wrong to say that this is about appreciating nature, but it's ignoring like half the poem because half the poem is talking about the cathedral towers and the choir and all those church elements. So I have to kind of marry them together. And the key is in the ending lines, right? He says, listen, the choir is singing. Well, the birds in nature are the choir. In leafy galleries beneath the eaves are singing. Listen ere the sound be fled. And then this last line is the key. And very often in a sonnet or any poem, there will be a moment in the poem that gives you a little opening to that deeper meaning that we're talking about, right? That analysis that we can do. Learn that there may be worship without words. Well, what church have you ever been to where there's a worship ceremony of any kind, a service, where nobody's talking or singing or there's no words at all? That doesn't happen. So if you go to mass, if you go to your church service, whatever you go to, somebody talks, somebody reads, somebody sings, there are words. So in that last line, I can get the idea that he's saying that nature is its own church. Nature is its own testament to the creator because it's even more beautiful than anything a man would make. Anything man made is less beautiful than what God made himself, right? So the suggestion is you can worship in nature. You don't have to go to a church in order to worship. That's what he's trying to present to us. You can, actually, it's almost more profound to worship God in his own creation than it is to go to a man-made structure and worship like beautiful carvings and the architecture that man created. It's more direct to go into nature, is what he's saying, and worship God in his own church that he made. So can you see how I took it from making sure that I'm touching on not just nature, but also the church thing? Like it's not a complete analysis if you ignore part of something just because you don't get it, or you can't find a way to work it in. You have to try to find a way to work it in to get the full meaning of the poem. Can you see how much richer that is than we should appreciate nature? So it's not wrong, it's just not complete because I ignored all the parts about the cathedral and the arches and the choirs. I ignored all that so that I could just make a statement about nature. It's too simple. It's like surface level. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Were you able to get some good notes? I know that I didn't prepare notes for you like on slides or anything, but hopefully by looking at those two examples, you can get some notes on the difference between summary and analysis. I'll give you one more example that's not poetry related. It's going to be dating related. Are you ready? Say that your best friend had a crush and that crush asked them out. Let's pretend it's not COVID and you're allowed to go to, you know, restaurants and you can go to the movies and all that. And your crush asked your friend out, and she or he is super excited to go on this date. And they go on the date. The next day, your friend calls you up to, like, you know, tell you what happened. If your friend just tells you, well, we went to the movies and afterwards we went for some ice cream. I don't know what kids do nowadays. Probably not that. Play video games. I don't know. And that's all that your friend tells you. That's a summary of the date, right? But if your friend tells you, well, we went to the movies and we saw this and we had ice cream and we played video games, whatever, I think he really likes me, or I think she really likes me. The I think she really likes me part is the analysis part, because they're taking all the clues that happened during the date and making a determination about it, right? So we want to get to that point with our literature, not just summarizing what happened. So hopefully that helps you make sense of that. And so everything we do needs to be working in that direction. So it's not really a complete analysis if we don't get to that. What is the human message? What's the lesson in it? What's the analysis? Okay, I want to go over the assignments for this week because I made a tutorial for you. Next week, we're going to write a full poetry analysis essay. That's going to be the gist of the assignment for next week. So this week, we're going to do some preparation for that. And you will see that I set up a tutorial. It's called Echo Sonnet Tutorial right here. So there is a tutorial on slides here that you need to work your way through. And it will walk you through all of the steps. Sometimes you'll have to click on an image to open it, but basically what you'll be doing, let me go back a slide, is you'll be discovering the way that poetry essay questions are stated on the AP exam. You will understand the way that the essay is scored by College Board. There's a video and like a scoring guide rubric that you can look at on one of the slides. And you will examine sample essays and score them to get a feel for what needs to be accomplished in an AP essay. So you're going to go through the tutorial. It has, how many slides does it have? 9, I think. 9 slides. And there are 2 slides that have an assignment to them, and they will have little stop signs on them. I think it's number 8 and 9. So wherever there's a stop sign, that's where you're going to fill something in on this assignment that you'll turn in. So this is kind of like checking to make sure that you're understanding what is happening in the tutorial, if that makes sense. So that's the main job this week. I will be, and also, well, if you didn't finish the quiz from last week on the sonnets, then you should do that. And then Monday we're going to go through some of the questions from that next Monday. The other thing you can do this week, I also have the formatives on here, but that's every week. Next week, we're going to be doing, like I just said, we're going to be writing our own poetry analysis essay. So if you wanted to preview, I'm going to let you choose one of these 3 actual prompts from the AP exam, whichever one you want to write your essay about. So if you wanted to before next week, you could take a look at those options and maybe start narrowing it down. There are 3 different ones, and so whichever one you want to do is up to you. I'm going to give you that option next week. But if you wanted to get ahead a little bit and just start getting a feel for which essay was something that you wanted to write on, then you can, I put them there so that ahead of time you can check them out. So the assignments are the formatives. This is an A week, so we have 3 formatives this week. The Echo Sonnet tutorial, because there was a sonnet on the AP exam on the written portion once that I know of. There have been multiple sonnets in the multiple choice section, many, many times. And then if you want to, you can preview options for next week's essay. All right, how are we feeling about that? Yeah? Do y'all have any questions? I know it's a short class period today, but it's only because I'm delaying those multiple choice discussion until everybody has a chance to do it. How did you find that? Was it pretty easy? Not too bad? I think the average was like 11 or 12 right out of 17, which is excellent. Just of the ones that I happened to see when I checked. All right, I know that 2 weeks ago we were talking about having class sometimes on Wednesday. Last week, only 2 people showed up for class to go over the homework. So I'm just gonna leave it like this. If you have questions over the tutorial, I don't think you will, but if you do, just email me. I don't see the point of having a class this week. Next week, we probably will meet on Wednesday, or I'll make the availability on Wednesday, because we'll be working on that poetry analysis essay. And maybe you would have questions for me as you're working on your draft or something like that. Or we could do more of a walkthrough type thing on that day. But this week, I don't see the need to meet on Wednesday or Friday. Everybody okay with that? Use the time to work on your tutorial. All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and close class for today. If there aren't any questions, if you do have a question, you can stick around afterwards and I will be glad to answer it. Otherwise, I will see you on Monday. What's the date gonna be next Monday? 25th? I think it's the 25th. All right, I hope you all have a great week and enjoy the rest of your day today while the weather's nice.
All right. Bye, miss. Have a good day.
Bye. See you later. Elizabeth, did you have a question? Melissa, do you want to do your discussion real quick?
Yes.
Okay. Which book did you read?
I read the things they carried by, I think his name is Tim O'Brien.
Yeah, what did you think of it?